Hi everyone, my name's Nistavid, and today we're going to be looking at a deck tech for the purple leader Kaido. Much like his counterpart in the source material, he's going to use his resources to his advantage. First off, he's going to use his base of operations to be able to use resources, as well as use his crew and attacks in order to provide the first line of defense. He lets his crew handle situations that he doesn't deem fit for himself, until finally he gets out on the field and handles the situation to deal the last blow. Although he is slow to start, once he gets quickly ramped up, he will be able to deal a ton of damage. So without further ado, let's take a look at the deck tech for Kaido, the purple leader of the Animal Kingdom Pirates. Kaido is a 5000 power, 5 life leader and has the ability for once per turn, during your main phase, you can return 7 Dawn to the Dawn deck and trash one of your opponent's life right to the trash. They don't get to activate trigger, and this is good because you can use any Dawn that is rested or attached to any of your characters. This is great because you can use it to attack for a heavy hit and then finally take that Dawn off one of your characters or leader and use it to use this effect. Next, let's take a look at some staple cards. First up is Onigashima Island. This card here is a 3-cost card, and when you rest it, you get to place a Dawn in your rested area. This card is a must because it allows you to ramp up very quickly and play 3 cards per turn in order to get yourself up to that 10 Dawn very quickly. Although it is a rested Dawn, it is still very versatile as a lot of your characters and cards require you to return 1 Dawn to the Dawn deck in order to activate their abilities. If you are the first player, during your second turn you will already be at 4 Dawn, and on turn 3 you will be at 6 Dawn. The next staple card is the 10-cost Kaido. With 12,000 power and on play you can return 6 Dawn, you get to KO every other character on the field, including your own. This is a field wipe card. This card here allows you to reset the game and also give yourself a powerhouse card available to you. I will go into more detail in the end how to properly play this card in order to set yourself up for a better advantage. Next up, we're going to take a look at a very similar card. We're going to look at the 9-cost Kaido card. This card here has 10,000 power, and on play you can return 5 Dawn to the Dawn deck, and this card here you can trash a 6-cost or lower character card, and you also gain Rush. This means you can attack your opponent right away for 10,000, and as well, you get to take care of one of their heavy hitters or a potential blocker. By ramping up quickly, you'll be able to play these cards very soon and are high threats to your opponent. The next staple card we're going to look at is the 7-cost King. With 7,000 power and on play, you get to return 2 Dawn and KO a 3-cost or less and a 2-cost or less. This card is great because it allows you to get through those pesky 1-cost blockers, or as well deal with any of those 3-cost rush characters, or even some characters that do have strong abilities that are 3-cost or less. Next up is our first defensive card, and that is the 1-cost Blast Breath. It is a counter card where you return 1 Dawn and your leader or character gains plus 4,000 defense. This card is a must, as it's going to provide such high defensive capability and your opponent is going to have to try to attack for high damage in order to be able to break through this. The last staple card we're going to look at is the 5-cost Queen. This card is great because we are going to be able to have a 6,000 blocker on the field, which is hard to get through, as well as it has draw power. On play, you return 1 Dawn, draw 2 cards, and discard 1. You'll be able to discard any additional stage cards you have in hand, or any cards you might find that are not good against the opponent you're currently playing against. This allows you to search for additional blockers, or as well any additional counter cards that might be good, or even those Kaido cards that you might be missing. Next up, these cards are not considered staples, but I believe you should be running them in your deck. First up is Kurozumi Higurashi, and this is a 2-cost 3,000 card that has blocker and a 1,000 counter. This is the second blocker you're going to be running in your deck, and this card is great for the early game, especially when you're playing against very aggressive early game decks, especially when you're playing against currently in the meta the Zoro type decks with rush cards. The next card we're going to look at is very similar. It is a 2-cost blocker as well, and it's Black Maria, but this card has 2,000 power and a 1,000 counter. If you're going to choose between the two of them, I say choose the last blocker, as this one does not have as much power, and you're going to want a stronger power card because you can either defend higher or you can potentially swing for a higher attack with using less Dawn. Next up, we're going to talk about the last event card that I have in this deck, and that is Thunder Bagua. It is a counter card for 2, and you get to give one of your leaders or characters plus 4,000 power. And if you have 2 or less life, you get to play a Dawn card in your rested area. It also has a trigger that you get to add 1 Dawn card in your rested area as well if you were to take that damage and this card were to show up. Lastly, we're going to be talking about cards that I personally like to play. And the first one is Page One. 4 cost, 6,000 attack, and 1,000 counter. This card is great to be used as not only a counter, but with Ulti's ability, which you'll be seeing here in a moment. It's definitely a good card to have. So I personally like to run this one in my deck. The next set of cards are all the 2,000 counters I like to run, especially when you're playing against early aggression decks. The first one's going to be X Drake. With 5 cost 5,000 and a 2,000 counter, on play you can return 1 Dawn to the Dawn deck and your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. This is great, especially when you're playing against another defensive player, because it allows them to remove those cards from their hand, and it gives you that advantage. Next up is the 4 cost 5,000 Ulti with 2,000 counter. On play you can return 1 Dawn and play a Page One from your hand. So this goes hand in hand with the Page One that I showed you earlier, and it gives us that mid-game aggro that we might need if we're playing against a defensive deck, or playing the Mirror Match Kaido. And finally, the last card I like to run in this deck is Sasaki. 3 cost, 4,000 and 2,000 counter. You can attach 1 Dawn, and once during your main phase when you're attacking, you get to trash 1 card from your hand, and you get to add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck. Now let's take a look to see how many of each card I'm running. So first off, we're going to run 4 of our stage cards. This is important because we can trash them from our hand for cards such as Sasaki or Queen. Next up, I run 3 of each Kaido. Reason is because they don't have counters, but we're going to want to see them pop up as much as possible. And because they are our heavy hitters in the deck, we still want to make sure that we are able to come across them, but we also don't want to be flooded in our hands with non-counter cards and not be able to ramp up and able to use them. Then we're also going to run 4 of our Kings. This here so we can get rid of those early game blockers, as well as get rid of some potential 3-cost damage dealers. Next up, for some other staple cards, we're going to run 4 Blast Breaths as well as 4 Queens. This is so we can get that additional safety net, and with Blast Breath, it is a very good card to have, and Queen, we want that draw power. So we can use them as both defensively, or potentially with Queen, we can use it so that way we are able to get that draw power in our hand and search for the cards we may or may not need. Those are the amounts of the staple cards I run. Let's take a look at the ones that are, I believe, the musts. So we're going to run of the 2-cost blockers, 4 of each. This is important because we need that early game defense, and even for mid to late game you can still play them, but you're most likely going to want to get your heavy hitters out there. So still 4 of each is good because they still have the 1,000 counter as well. Next up, we're going to run 4 of our last event card because it gives us that Dawn as well, especially if we're playing against an aggressive deck. We're going to want to ramp up quicker and make sure we're able to get that Dawn off the counter. Then we're going to want to play 4 Ultis for the 2,000 counter, and then in retrospect, we're also going to want to play 4 Page Ones, just in case we are playing against a defensive deck. We can technically use Ulti's ability, but then we can use Page One's counter as well instead. For the rest of the 2,000 counters, I'm going to use 4 X Drakes because not only is the 2,000 counter great, but his ability is also great, and we're also going to run 4 Sasakis as well. Sasaki's ability is fairly strong as well, but mainly we want 4 of these guys because we want them to have that 2,000 counter on our deck for that defensive capability to make sure we can survive to the late game. Next, let's take a look at some strategies. This card here, your stage card, is the thing that revolves around your entire deck. This is what's going to be able to ramp you up to everything you need, and we're going to want to wait until we get to the third turn or the second turn to play it. So what you're going to want to do is once you have that 3 Dawn, you're going to want to play your card, then rest it, and you're going to get your 4th Dawn. Then, during your 3rd turn, you're going to be able to get 2 more Dawn, which brings us up to 6, and technically speaking now, we can rest our stage card again, and it's going to bring us up to 7 Dawn. So by our 4th turn, we're going to be at 10 Dawn already. So we'll be able to ramp up much quicker than our opponent and be able to play those heavy hitters very, very quickly. We want to ramp up as quickly as possible to get our heavy hitters out to clear the field, especially when playing against green decks that use lots of defensive capabilities or law decks that have lots of characters out on the field. The next strategy I want to talk about is the 10 cost Kaido. And the reason for this is when to play him. So for example, say you have 10 Dawn open and you're able to play him right away. You could do that, but let's say you're playing against a mirror matchup where your opponent also may have this card. If you play the 10 cost Kaido and your opponent has 10 Dawn available, they may next turn play the 10 cost Kaido as well. So what you're going to want to do is hold on to Kaido until you're able to see an opportunity that is beneficial to yourself. So obviously if you're down to your last life and it's a do or die situation, that is when you're going to want to play him. But if you have an opportunity to hold off, you're going to want to hold off playing your Kaido until it is absolutely beneficial and you know your Kaido is not going to be taken out. Because you're going to want this Kaido to survive as long as you can so your opponent cannot deal with him. So first, you may want to play your 9 cost Kaido with Rush, so that way it's a bigger threat and your opponent tries to deal with him. Or maybe even a King, so that way you can take out some of your opponent's characters, more than one, and then they deal with the King instead. Lastly, I want to talk about Queen and Queen's utility. So for example, we're already going to have one stage card in play. When we draw with Queen, we're going to be able to search for things and discard with our second stage card. This allows us to look for multiple different cards, and because we have the high blocking capability, it allows us to get into the later game. So we'll be able to find things like 2,000 counters, or as well, we can protect Queen with those 2,000 counters. Lastly, we want to search for our 10k Kaido in order to get us into that late game. And that's it, everyone. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Once again, this was the Purple Kaido deck tech. If you have any comments below, or you want to see a different deck tech, or you have some changes you would have made to this one, please leave a comment down below, like and subscribe. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care, everyone.